right, good morning, guys. It is bright and early on Saturday, and we are going to finally fix a car again. It's been a while since I've been able to do this on video. So what we've got today is, let's see if it shows up a little bit here. We've got, I'm not sure what it is. I think it's a 1996, maybe 1997 Ford Ranger, it looks like. According to the owner, all she said is, I just hope you can make it run the way it should. That's her exact words. I hope you can make it run the way it should. She says it runs bad. She can't really describe it. She admits she's terrible when it comes to cars. And she's also not even familiar with this car. So she's a little bit of an older lady. Her mom passed away a while ago. And when her mom passed away, she inherited this truck. And so she's not familiar, doesn't know anything about it. When trying to bring the truck back to her house, she realized that it just, as she says, runs terrible. It was very hard to start. That's all I know. I don't even know if there's check engine light on. I don't know what she means by it runs terrible. I tried to dig that out of her, and she couldn't really describe it, and didn't want to push her on it too, especially given the situation that it's not too long ago that this all happened, so she's got other things to worry about. My job, get the car to run right, whatever that means. And what we're going to do today is not only fix the car, but also I wanted to thank you guys for your feedback on my last video where I talked about kind of the business model I have here in my little do-it-yourself operation, business model with YouTube. Your guys' feedback on that was overwhelmingly positive. You said there was lots of information that helped you guys who are already doing similar to what I do or want to. So we're going to expand on that by not covering so much the business modeling anymore, but I will show you some insight into my business operations that may help you as well if you are interested in doing this or if you're already doing kind of a thing, maybe you're a mobile mechanic or whatever. So we will kind of infuse some of that in with a little of the business operations while I go ahead and fix this car. So the first thing that we are going to do, obviously, is we need to define what the issue is with this car, because typically when people come in, they tell me I need, this or that done, or the car hesitates at stoplights, or it stumbles, or whatever. I don't even have that much information. Now, it actually doesn't matter, because what we're going to do next is something I do with every single car I get in here anyway. I just don't usually show it on camera, but what that is I always take the car for a spin around the block, at least, if not a little bit more, no matter what it is. The reason for that isn't so much for what we're going to do today, where we're going to try to determine what the problem is. It's so that I can draw a baseline of what the vehicle's operation and any issues with it, noises, things like that, so I can get a baseline of that, so that when I fix the car and I take it for a drive to verify it, I know what was already there with the car. So for example, if I take the car out for a drive after fixing it and I notice, man, when I take off from a light, the car really stumbles and hesitates or something. Well, was that there before? I may not have noticed that if I just started working on the car, went on a check engine light code that I've got. Well, there's check engine light code. We fix that properly, take it for a spin. Well, did we introduce a new problem, or was that already there before? Even things like just a brake noise. How do I know that brake noise wasn't there before? Very often I have to remove the wheel, often the brake and rotor components to get to things in the engine. Did I cause that noise when I put things back together? And now the customer is going to be like, hey, my car works great, thank you so much, but now there's this brake noise that I didn't have before. Well, you don't want to do that. Also, it introduces opportunities for you. If I hear the brake noise, I can bring it up to them and say, hey, by the way, while driving it, I also noticed you had a brake noise. Very often they'll say, oh yeah, can you do something with that too? So it opens up more opportunities. Very often, even I may find minor things that I can just fix for free and just say, hey, by the way, I know you had a belt squeal when I started the car up, and I just secured the tensioner up or something like that, and now that's fixed. Oh man, they appreciate that tremendously. They've been dealing for that for years, and you just fixed it for free. You noticed it on your initial drive, right? So we're going to go ahead and take it for the initial drive. We're going to see if we can determine what's wrong with the truck that needs to be fixed, and also look for any kind of eccentricities with the car or something like that. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, well, in getting in the car, I noticed that the car wobbles around really easy. It doesn't seem to have very good shocks, and we'll have to check some of that stuff a little bit later. It's not the main complaint, but we'll take a look at that. The car is a manual transmission. I did not know that. The woman actually pulled the car up into my garage here, so it's going to make the camera work a little trickier than normal, so you'll have to bear with me on that. The very first thing I want to do is I want to see if we've got a check engine light on. So let's see here. Let's make sure the parking brake is on. I'm going to go ahead and start this car up. Ooh, long crank time. Long crank time. And the car started. Oh, and it's running horribly rough. Let's see if I can keep it running here. Man, it was just stumbling. I often don't show this on camera because it doesn't come through, but at idle, this car is just barely able to keep an idle. It just died. Okay, so it won't hold the idle. While doing that, let's try that again and see if we still get a long crank time, because we can get a diagnosis there on something. Now, still a really, not as long as before, but it's got a long crank time for sure. I'm going to keep this running. We do not have a check engine light on, which is a little disappointing. So that makes it a little tougher to get direction. This car will not hold an idle. It keeps wanting to die. I have to keep giving it gas to keep it running. I'm going to say that I'm going to go in the direction of a vacuum leak just on those symptoms. Yeah, this is barely holding an idle. Let me go ahead and just turn it off for a second. So very often when I do these drives, I will take the scan tool with me and stuff. I'm not going to do that right now. Right now, I'm not so interested in making the diagnostics as much as I am in gathering symptoms and just kind of a general feel. I don't really know the complaint, although I have a pretty good idea of it now. But yeah, very often I'll put the scan tool up. I'll get some basic scan data while I'm doing my initial test drive. But I just don't want to be distracted often from other things like, you know, how's the steering feel? How's the braking feel? How's the shifting feel? I usually do that a little bit later after I start getting into the diagnostics. Let me do this. I'm going to turn the key on and off a couple times. What I'm doing is I'm trying to rule out is that long start time from possibly a bad fuel pump, bad check valve. It has a much shorter startup time now, but it still has a long start, long crank time, not nearly like that initial one was. So I'm kind of thinking possible bad check valve there, which would be unrelated to drivability problems. This car could very well have a bad fuel pump with these symptoms. Wow, it just will not hold the idle. Vacuum leak is probably the direction that I'm thinking. Wow, it just backfired too. All right, backfiring, you know, probably not so much with the vacuum leak. This may be a fuel problem. And sorry guys, I'm just trying to get this engine to be able to run here. It just won't hold the idle unless I stay on the gas. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and try to keep it warmed up. All right, now it's holding an idle. And the idle's not the greatest, for sure. All right, so the first thing that I always do by habit whenever I get a car in my garage is I roll down the window. And the reason for that, actually, how do you roll down the window on this thing? Oh my gosh, it has, look at this. See, that actually caught me. It has the old crank window. Oh my goodness, that's awesome. I haven't seen one of these in so long. But the reason I roll down the window, I want to take absolutely no chance whatsoever that I accidentally lock the keys in the vehicle. So the first thing I always do on every car by habit, I roll down that driver's window so there's no possibility of locking keys in the car. All right, The idle is absolutely horrific here. I am going to go ahead and try to back this car up. So let me see if I can position this camera somewhere. All right, we're going to get out of here. I can tell you now that the car's warmed up, it's actually not running all that bad. For a minute, I was wondering how this woman even got the car here. So we're definitely going in direction of vacuum leak based just on those symptoms. Doesn't mean we're going to go replacing gaskets and everything. We're going to get data, of course. All right, and this car has like no power at all. Absolutely struggles. Go ahead and shift here. You see my neighborhood's coming along pretty good. They got the houses all built now and everything. We want to get to an area where we got less traffic. The car's really noisy. Yep. See, this is what I was saying earlier. This is a reason why I do these drives. This car's got a pretty loud wheel bearing noise is what it sounds like to me. So again, just something that we can check and we can bring up to the customer that, you know, when we fix things, by the way, I noticed you got a real loud growl or groan, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, it's always done that. And you can tell them what that is and what it would be to fix it. Okay, the brakes feel really good. The steering is actually pretty good. Definitely the suspension is pretty weak. Yeah, there's kind of like a scrape, 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 scrape. That could be just as simple as a dust shield rubbing against the rotor. You just bend that out of the way. And for you, it took you 3 seconds. For them, you're a god. They've been dealing with that scrape, 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 scrape forever. And you just fix it, and they just think you're amazing. So that's the advantage of doing these test drives. I always do this with every vehicle. I just generally don't show it. To be honest with you, the car runs really well now. It's got its power back a bit. It's not misfiring. It's not stumbling or hesitating. I want to come to a stop here and see what it feels like coming off the line. Yeah, the clutch feels really good. Sounds like a bit of a power steering whine as well, adding just a little power steering fluid. Make all the difference for these guys. The car drives really good now. So I don't see any lack of power or anything like that. So I think it's just really when it first starts up. This car seems to have the appropriate amount of power and response. I'm going to go ahead and kind of floor it a bit. And it goes. It absolutely goes. All right, I'm going to bring it back into the garage, and I'm pretty satisfied that we know what the complaint is here. All right, I did do a little bit more of a test drive after the camera was off. I can tell you that the alignment on the truck I've noticed was off when I got up to a little bit higher speeds. So another thing we're going to take note of and write down for the customer. So at this point now, I want to just show you a little bit about the business operations again and what I typically do from this point. So I'm going to look and see, there's the mileage there. Is that right? That can't be. It says 71,410 miles. So I do record the odometer. I record license plate, information like that, just for my records, so that the next time the car comes in, I may be able to say, well, you know, it's been 5,000 miles since an oil change, if I did the oil change last time. Things like that. That is amazing. Well, you know what? That kind of makes sense. Again, the person who had this car would have been an elderly person. I know they lived on a farm, and I know that the woman intends on getting this car fixed up and giving it to one of her kids. So that's quite a gem. 71,410. That's amazing. All right, let's go do some paperwork. All right, and just because I normally am working on more than one car at a time, I just leave the keys typically on the seat. Again, all the more reason why I roll the window down here, right? All right, let's go. All right, for every one of my customers, I'll create a folder for them here. And if it is a new customer, I'll have to create a new folder. It turns out this is a previous customer of mine. I've actually done work for her before. So what I have is a template that I use both for billing and also very much for my own records. And this information will contain the date, the person's name, their contact information, information about the car, mileage, license, VIN number, all that, and of course a list of any issues and everything. I do divide out labor and parts and things and try to keep pretty detailed notes on it. Again, much of this is also for me in the future if I work on the car again so that I can have a readily available history of what I've done before. Very often I get repeat customers, which makes it a lot easier. It's always harder when you got a lot of chefs in the kitchen. One of the first things that I'm going to do is I want to get accurate description on exactly what kind of car this is. So I'm going to share a little trick with you that I shared with some of the guys over on the paid channel. Many of you guys will be aware of this. We're going to go ahead and open the old interwebs up, and we're going to go into my automotive folder, and we're going to go to this free VIN decoder. It's decodethis.com, decodethis.com. And I am going to type in the VIN number right here, 7751. All right, and then when we hit the decode button, what it'll do, oh, it's a 97, all right? So 97 Ford Ranger tells you the engine type. Really nice thing, it tells you the trim level and the body type as well, so that you can make sure if there's different trim levels and things. Oftentimes they will have different size brakes, different size rotors, different things on the suspension that you come back and you're like, hey, this rotor isn't the same. Well, it's because you didn't tell the auto parts store the right trim level. So this is all information that I'm going to load into my little detail sheet here, and I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be right back. We can see here our information that I filled in from that website that I showed you. This is hugely helpful to make sure that I get the right parts, things like that. I can always print this out and bring it to the parts store, for example. This is license number. There is actually no license on the truck. It's unregistered at this particular time. She obviously needs me to get it fixed before she can do all that. Then I always start off with, of course, the main customer complaint. Describing this as wind cold. There's a very long crank time, hard start, rough idle and dies, and I may fill in some more detail with that as I'm working and see some other symptoms as well. We don't have a diagnosis or recommended service on this yet. Once I figure out exactly what is wrong, then I will call the customer and tell them what we need and also a quote on what it would cost. Other customer complaints in the order of severity would go down here. This is her only complaint. This is the one that we are absolutely going to focus on, but I will also take notes of things that I discovered and put them as well for record, and maybe the customer wants to take care of them later or even now. I discovered the weak suspension. I discovered the wheel bearing noise on the test drive. Also discovered the left front headlamp is missing. Not out, it's missing, like right here. So not sure what the deal is there. Now typically on something like this, because I really like Liz, she actually, I mentioned her before, she was on Nextdoor and I helped her out fixing her car, and then she went back on Nextdoor and posted a absolutely raving review about me that had my phone ringing off the hook for weeks, which is not always a blessing. Again, I don't do this for a living. So it definitely ate up a lot of my time, but I was still very grateful for it. This is something that I would typically fix for the cost of the headlamp and put a headlamp in there. You just got to be really careful promising stuff like that. Maybe that headlamp's missing because they did put in a new headlamp and it still didn't light up. So they took it out to try to trace an electrical problem that they couldn't solve. Well, I don't want to buy into that and just get her a headlamp and connect it up, find out, well, now I've got to do a 3-hour electrical diagnostic because it's got a short somewhere or whatever. So you just need to be really careful on things, but Typically little things like this I will try to do for people either free or just at the cost of the part. Down here I've got a little bit of a warranty. I do a lot of used parts from salvage yards for people who can't afford the repair and stuff, so things like that, and then later on a little liability waiver kind of stuff and everything. So what we want to do is we want to focus particularly here on problem number one. I have a pretty good idea what I think the issue is. I think there's actually two issues here, and I want to try to be strategic in how I approach this. And my strategy here is going to be to ensure that I don't get a comeback on this. I think there may be more than one thing going on here, and while I believe that a vacuum leak is going to be the most likely thing, it's very tempting to just put a smoke machine on here. Maybe we validate that there is indeed a vacuum leak after the mass airflow sensor, and then you would fix that. You see the car runs better, you send it off, and then maybe it comes back later with a P171 code. And the reason is because, as I mentioned many times before, I never drew a baseline. So I didn't have any evidence that I completely fixed the vehicle, how much impact the vacuum leak had on these symptoms. So I'm not going to make that mistake. These are weird. I have actually seen this before. This is a 4-cylinder engine, but there are 8 spark plug wires here. There's actually 2 spark plugs per cylinder. I remember the first time I ever saw this a few years ago, it totally threw me. But this is one of the things about being a do-it-yourselfer is very often you get cars and it's the first time you've ever seen them, and I'm not very familiar with this engine. But what we're going to do is we're going to do things a little backwards. Obviously, the smart thing to do here would be to go ahead and take it out on a test drive again, get some fuel trim data, things like that. Right now it's going to be different because unbeknownst to you guys, I actually had to go take care of some things and I did some film editing on the first part here. So this car's been sitting actually for about 3 hours now. And I don't want to warm it up again at this point. I do want to get that smoke test done. But then after the smoke test, if I find a vacuum leak, we are still going to get baseline fuel trim data so that I can validate the repair when I make it. And hopefully it is a vacuum leak. It sure seems to be one. Notice also we got a Schrader valve right here. That's going to be very helpful because I do believe we also have a fuel problem. All right, so for the smoke test, I have a special treat for you guys that we will go into a little bit later on another video, but I'm going to give you a preview of it right now because I am so excited. And the reason I'm so excited is I have a new smoke machine, but this is not just any smoke machine. This is a smoke machine with a built-in pump. So I don't need to use my air compressor for making compressed air for the smoke machine in order to pressurize. This has its own pump on it, and here's the most amazing part. The most amazing part is this smoke machine with the air pump you can get for, gosh, it's like under a couple $100. And you can get a complete kit with all kinds of accessories and everything for just a little bit more than that. I love this thing so much. This is amazing. I'm going to show it to you as a little preview. I made a little agreement with the company that makes this where if you are on my paid channel, we're going to give you a discount on this so you can get this thing for an incredibly low price. Something like this that I already have before, you're talking $600 to $800. We're talking like a quarter of that price. Now a do-it-yourselfer can get this, and here's the best thing. You don't even need the air compressor. If you don't have an air compressor, no problem, it's built in. Think of that for a mobile mechanic. You don't have the air compressor handy and everything. You just run this right off the car battery. You can do a smoke test. This thing would pay for itself with the first diagnostic, even if you're just your own do-it-yourselfer on your own car. Super excited about this. We will detail this in the next video, but I am so excited. I'm just going to go ahead and show this to you guys right now. So let me go ahead and set up. All right, we can see our setup here. It's just the machine pretty much, and it hooks right up to the battery. We've got 2 switches on here. One of them will just be heat only, and that's if you've got the model that would hook up to an air compressor. It's a little bit less expensive, but I got to tell you, having the built-in air compressor, totally worth it. We're going to go ahead and turn the air compressor on. We can see it produces the smoke. Going to go ahead and put that right into the intake here. And let's give this a minute or two and see what comes out of the intake. Well, if we look here, we can see some smoke wafting up. It's not nearly as significant as I thought. Looking around the rest of the engine, I just want to make sure here that you see all the smoke, that we are loading this system up pretty good with smoke here. Get that out of there. This is not as significant a vacuum leak as I had hoped for. And again, maybe the engine hasn't cooled down quite as much. Let's see. I don't know. It's pretty cool. So I don't think vacuum leak is quite as significant as I thought. All this smoke here is coming from around the IAC, the idle air control valve. It's just, obviously that gasket needs to be replaced, but this is not a major contributor to our issue here. So definitely I am more inclined to go towards a fuel problem. Looks like we got a little bit leaking out of the EGR as well. But my little smoke machine gizmo really did a great job, didn't it? All right, that was a little bit unexpected. Hear that pump going there? All right, we're going to turn that off. This thing did its job one way or the other, helped with the diagnosis. I was expecting there, just based on the symptoms, to be a vacuum leak. Obviously, many of you guys are a little bewildered that I still haven't done any scan data yet. Obviously, I would normally do scan data first and even determine if there's evidence of the vacuum leak. But again, I wanted to take advantage of the cold engine. And honestly, really, I just wanted to show this thing off to you. We are going to cover this in the next video that I do, and I will show you how you can get a really nice discount on this as well. And you can just get this thing for an incredible, incredible price. And it's just super high quality. I can't speak enough about how I love this thing and just that built-in air compressor, man. But what it did do for us is it actually confirmed that this does not appear to be a vacuum leak. And at this point, I kind of wish we did the fuel trim numbers first, but then I wouldn't have been able to show you this, so I don't apologize for that. But I think when we do the fuel trim numbers, I don't think we're going to see positive fuel trims based on this. I'm not quite sure what we'll see. I do believe that one way or another, we still have at least one fuel problem here based on that really, really, really long crank time, check valve problem, maybe something like that. So I think, well, really the right thing to do would be to go to the scan tool. The thing is that the car's been sitting for a while. I expect it's going to have that really long crank time once again. I want to take advantage of that first. And instead of running the engine to do the scan tool, I want to hook up a fuel pressure gauge now so that we can see if at the very minimum do we have a bad check valve to explain that long crank time. And also, do we have a fuel pressure problem? So a little bit out of my usual sequence, I agree, but just, you want to have a strategy where you are being as efficient as possible. I believe we're going to catch that really long crank time here. I don't want to lose that. So let's get fuel pressure set up on this next. We will talk about this guy next video, though. It is so exciting. I can't wait for you guys to see more about this.